home or car, they fuel the economic development, provide good-paying jobs, and pump resources back into these rural communities. If these community banks and credit unions close, it would cut off access to capital for millions of Americans and communities, and they would suffer. Livelihoods would be destroyed. That's why I, along with my colleague from Florida, Senator Rick Scott, have introduced a bill prohibiting the IRS from creating, implementing, or administering a financial reporting regime that would require financial institutions or individuals to report data or financial transactions or account balances to the IRS. To be clear, my legislation does not touch the Bank Secrecy Act or any of the regulations or either implemented or issued under that act. My bill has been endorsed by the American Bankers Association, the Independent Community Bankers of America, National Association of Federally Insured Credit Unions, the Credit Union National Association, Heritage Action of America, the League Southeastern Credit Unions, and the Alabama Bankers Association. These organizations and their members know that if President Biden's proposal goes through, banking as we know it will end. Mr. President, at this time, I'd like to yield the floor to my distinguished colleague from Florida, Mr. Scott.
Mr. President.
Senator from Florida.
Mr. President, I'd like to thank Senator Tuberville for leading this very important effort. I want to be very clear. What President Biden is proposing here is as close to policy from Communist China that we've seen in the United States. In oppressive regimes like Cuba and Communist China, we've come to expect a surveillance state where the government has access to every part of a person's life. Now, Joe Biden wants to bring that here to America. Let me explain what the Biden administration and Democrats in Washington are proposing. Democrats want to open your bank account to federal agents. Under Joe Biden's America, the federal government's authority would be vastly expanded so the IRS could get a look at any account over $600. The madness doesn't stop there. This new rule from Joe Biden would also require banks to report every transaction of $600 or more. And does anyone honestly think the federal government will keep your private information safe? Want to buy a bed? Here comes the federal government. Let's say you want to buy a new shotgun. Hunting season's coming up. Again, here comes the feds. How about giving money to your favorite charity, supporting a cause or a political candidate you care about, paying for child care, or paying for mental health counseling? Perhaps you're just selling off some old furniture and want to put your profits in a savings account. For every one of these transactions I've just described, the government is going to come take a look. Every American should be disgusted and furious by this insane overreach of the federal government. Think about the private, personal information the government would have access to. It's incredibly intrusive, and Joe Biden wants to make it nearly limitless. And again, does anyone honestly think the federal government will keep your private information safe? I know Florida families are angry. I've heard from more than 18,000 constituents over just the last 2 weeks about how disgusted they are with this plan. Biden wants to expand the surveillance state of the federal government to target every American family. 95% of American households have a bank account, and this policy will have impacts on every single one of those account holders. But it's not just banks. Joe Biden is expanding his federal surveillance state to monitor your finances across the board. They'll be watching your local credit union, your PayPal, and Venmo accounts. They'll even be watching to see how you spend and earn cryptocurrency. Mr. President, this is an outrageous violation of Americans' privacy. I think the Democrats are also hearing from their constituents. We've seen reports in the press that the Democrats in the House are looking at raising the threshold from $600 to $10,000. That will still hit many American families. We're not just talking about checking accounts. This applies to savings, retirement, investment accounts. You name it, the feds want to take a look. Again, I'm not describing something in Cuba or Communist China. I'm talking about what Joe Biden and the Democrats want to do right here in the USA. I can't wait for my Democrat colleague to explain why President Biden is even proposing this. How can you possibly justify to the American people that the IRS should be snooping around in their bank, retirement, or investment accounts? There's only one explanation, and it's simply terrifying. The Democrats want to control how you spend your money. Democrats want to control your expenditures, your charitable and political giving, and your investments. The more power Democrats can grab from American families, the more control they think they'll get over each and every American. This all boils down to Joe Biden and the radical left bringing the American people under the thumb of his socialist, tax and spend agenda. And after all, how else is it going to be able to squeeze every last penny out of Americans' families' bank accounts to pay for its socialist plans? Here's how the Democrat Party works. They refuse to audit our federal agencies that year after year send billions in improper payments to the wrong people, which they rarely ever recover. They refuse to hold our government accountable for reckless waste and massive debt. But they want to put the magnifying glass on hardworking families who are just trying to live their dreams. Under Biden's socialist regime, it's rules for thee, but not for me. How is that different from communist China, where the government elite live in opulence while their citizens live totally dependent on the government in poverty? I will not stand for this outrageous plan. No American should tolerate this unprecedented overreach. I'm proud to support Senator Tuberville's legislation and hope every one of my colleagues looks at this for what it is, communist China-style totalitarian surveillance. I yield back to Senator Tuberville.
Mr. President.
Senator from Alabama.
I'd like to yield the floor to my distinguished colleague from Indiana, Senator Braun.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville. Mr. President.
Senator from Indiana.
You know, every year I travel, visit every county in the state of Indiana, 92 of them. And you know, I can't ever recall anyone saying that they want the IRS to poke into their business more on a day-to-day basis. In fact, they bemoan the fact that many years ago the IRS was actually sifting through stuff to determine who was conservative or not before they might grant status to your entity. We've gotten to a point, and I think Senator Tuberville and Scott have eloquently laid out the details. I want to take a little different approach. I've been here a little less than 3 years, and this kind of entrepreneurialism through government, growing the federal government, having an agency like the IRS that can't do its job well with the money that we do give to it, is just another example of trying to pile on one bad thing after another. It'd be different if we weren't doing it, borrowing 23% of the money we spend every year. Imagine that in your own household, in a state or local government. A business, you'd be laughed out of the banker's office if you did that and then wanted a loan to cover it and then do it the next 10 years. Doesn't work anywhere else. This is an example that I think, along with maybe the vaccine mandate, where you're now forcing small businesses to do something when they finally got a rhythm, and businesses have protected their employees and their customers as well as anybody out there in that journey. You've got that nonsense going to be unfurled here soon, but it is an example of where at some point enough needs to be enough. The IRS has had a poor record of doing things to boot. Earlier, ProPublica released illegally obtained tax records of many Americans. We had the incident of issues with conservative businesses being discriminated against getting proper status set up. I introduced the Protect Taxpayer Privacy Act in June for that, because the IRS is already doing things that they shouldn't be doing. This would be a perfect companion to what Senator Tuberville is putting out here. To wrap it up, we got to be careful when we send people here, and if you were knocking it out of the park, delivering results, not borrowing money to do the things we try to do anyway, and then you tee up something like this. This is going to do nothing more than unleash more of an agency that doesn't do well at its job anyway, and it's truly an example of government gone wild. And I thank Senator Tuberville for bringing this to a focal point, and I yield back to you.
Mr. President.
Senator from Alabama.
Mr. President, I want to thank Senator Braun and Senator Scott again for supporting this bill. I'm proud to partner with him in this effort to safeguard the financial privacy of American citizens. As if in a legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S. 2953, which is at the desk. I further ask that the bill be considered, read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there an objection?
Reserving the right to object.
Senator from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and colleagues, the Senator's proposal, in effect, would be a game-winning touchdown for wealthy tax cheats. IRS Commissioner Rettig, a Republican appointee, came before the Finance Committee earlier this year and said the total amount of taxes evaded each year could be as high as $1 trillion. Cheating by those at the very top is one of the major causes of that huge tax gap. A big reason why is that the automatic reporting and strict rules that apply to the typical hard-working taxpayer, nurses and firefighters, for example, they don't always apply to those at the top. That means that tax cheats are able to hide their cheating in the shadows. The Senator's proposal would help them keep it that way. This proposal would make it extraordinarily difficult to collect the information necessary to crack down on the high-flying tax cheats. Now, the argument against information reporting is always the same, and it's been consistently wrong. Despite what opponents say, what President Biden and Democrats have proposed is focused on rooting out tax cheating at the top. It wouldn't apply to accounts with deposits and withdrawals under $10,000. And for most people, that's $10,000 on top of your paycheck. It's not about anybody's transactions. They wouldn't be reported, colleagues. It wouldn't create any new surveillance of digital currency. This information reporting proposal is about reporting only two numbers: the total amount going into an account and the total amount going out of it. Social Security income does not count either. So this idea, and I've listened to my friends that somehow this is going to end Western civilization, just doesn't hold up. In fact, Commissioner Rettig, a Republican appointee, pointed out recently that this plan could actually reduce the odds of an audit for middle-class taxpayers, those folks that I was talking about, the nurses and the firefighters. I'm going to close with just a couple of other points. Most of my colleagues know that I'm about as strong a privacy hawk as there is in the Senate. And I don't take a backseat to anybody when it comes to fighting for Americans' privacy, whether it's taxpayer data, communications, web traffic, you name it. And colleagues, all of that work, all of that private work is on the public record. It's a matter of public record. It isn't an atomic secret. In those debates about privacy, it's also striking that it's most often members of the other side attempting to stop reforms, for example, to government surveillance of phone records and emails and web browsing. But when Democrats are working to crack down on ultra-wealthy tax cheats, that's when suddenly we got Republicans saying, oh my goodness, who's going to be sensitive to privacy? I want to repeat, as I have on this floor again and again, I will talk to anybody on either side of the aisle with any philosophy about protecting taxpayer data. As the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, which handles privacy policy, I want it understood that our committee and I, particularly given my record on privacy issues, we take privacy very seriously. That's not what is on offer by the other side today. The bottom line is wealthy tax cheats are ripping off the American people to the tune of billions and billions of dollars per year. Tax cheats thrive when the reporting rules that apply to them are loose and murky. Democrats want to fix this broken approach and crack down on cheating at the top. The senator's proposal would make that impossible, and it would hand, colleagues, it would hand the senator's proposal a big fourth-quarter victory to the tax cheats. For that reason, I object. I yield the floor.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President.
Senator from Alabama.
Mr. President, this is a simple two-page bill that will protect every American from an invasion of privacy by Big Brother government IRS. I'm sorry to see that my Democratic colleagues oppose protecting the financial privacy of American taxpayers. That's a real shame. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a member of the United States Senate who can honestly say that a majority of their constituents support President Biden's proposal for the IRS to monitor a $600 or more transaction. I don't think you could find one. We ought to be able to stand up together in a bipartisan fashion to reject this radical proposal. I'm confident that the American people will continue to put pressure on their elected representatives to reject this plan. I will work with my colleagues to address legitimate concerns, though I suspect there are none, and any position is going to be purely political. Americans across the country can count on Senator Scott and myself to keep up the fight of this important issue. Mr. President, I notice the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.